The Propagation of the Gospel. 5. Paul's first missionary journey. Henceforth, in this history, by far the most conspicuous and commanding figure is Saul of Tarsus, afterwards known as Paul the Apostle. Palu, doesn't that mean like man of the city or something like that? He is one of the most powerful characters in the history of the world, and probably more of history has been affected by his influence than that of any other one man. Well, certainly among the Christian world. Though not of the original apostles, yet all the signs of an apostle were manifest in his works, and he doubtless does not exaggerate when he says that he labored more abundantly than they all. And we see that the definition of apostle or messenger of God kind of changed to fit the context of Paul and such. The religious context of it. He was born at Tarsus, near the northeastern corner of the Mediterranean Sea, not more than 100 miles from Antioch. It was the capital of the province of Sicilia, and had been for several centuries a city of much distinction. At the time of Paul, Strabo says that in all that relates to philosophy and general education, it was even more illustrious than Athens and Alexandria. It was, so far as culture and the character of its educated classes was concerned, a Greek city. For some time previous to Paul's birth, the province had been under Roman government. About 50 years before the birth of Paul, Cicero, as proconsul, had this is a assigned province with his official residence at Tarsus. Tarsus was a free city. That is, it had the privilege of being governed by its own magistrates and many other franchises, but that of Roman citizenship was not one of these. There were many Roman citizens there, but they had received this privilege by some special favor of the government. Paul's father, though a Jew, was a citizen, and Paul himself was thus freeborn. Paul was thus a Hellenistic Jew. That is, he was a Jew speaking to the Greek language and having the Greek culture to a certain extent at least, but neither he nor his family appeared to have ranked themselves as belonging to the Hellenistic party according to the divisions between that party and the Asmonean or Hebrew party. They have rather held more closely to the Jerusalem traditions and the more exclusive faith. Paul regarded himself as being a Hebrew of the Hebrews and preserved his family lineage and tribal descent, as he also bore the name of the most illustrious of that tribe. After his general education at Tarsus, he went, in his latter youth or early manhood, to Jerusalem, and there, under the direction of the most famous rabbi of his time, the celebrated Gamaliel, he became familiar with all the learning of the Jews. He adopted the tenets of the Pharisaic party and became a bigoted enthusiast in their defense of his bitter and fierce opposition to Christianity. We have already had evidence, other listing in the Book of Acts. The conversion of such a man was a remarkable event to the struggling young church, and a terrible shock to its Jewish opposers. A more powerful human instrumentally for the establishment and diffusion of the faith can scarcely be conceived. In him were combined results of three great civilizations which, meeting at that time in history and at that geographical point, met also in this one man. Well, we also see elements of historical figures. Historical as in not just mentioned in the Bible or some text of sacred history, but some text of, other groups admit that the person existed. Apollonius made his way into the Paul story, it seems, too. Not just Jesus, it didn't just affect that, it affected the Paul story. He was, both by birth and by the most thorough and determined training, a Jew, giving promise of becoming perhaps a blessed defender of that faith. He was a Greek by language and by culture, thus coming into communication with the whole learned world. He was a Roman citizen and entitled to a degree of protection and consideration which was denied to most of his countrymen. Such a man was eminently fit to be, not merely the scholar among the apostles, but more especially to be the apostle to the Gentiles. An apostle to people who weren't of Jewish ancestry, and it's not really appropriate to call people Gentiles and pagan and heathen and stuff like this because they're of a different social class or they're different, because some of these words that we translate as Gentile refer very specifically to witches and atheists and stuff like this. And Dr. Smith gives the following table of the chief epochs of Paul's life: his first appearance at Jerusalem as a persecutor, his conversion on the way to Damascus, his introduction to the apostles at Jerusalem, and retirement for a time to Tarsus, his labors at Antioch and visit to Jerusalem in 44 of the Common Era, his first missionary journey in Asia Minor, his visit to Jerusalem about the Gentiles, his second missionary journey and introduction of the gospel into Europe, his third missionary journey and long stay at Ephesus, his seizure at Jerusalem and imprisonment at Caesarea, his voyage to Rome and first imprisonment, his release and subsequent labors, his second imprisonment and martyrdom. So he definitely writes about far more stages about the life of his life than the life of Christ. He only seems to have ideas regarding a supposed crucifixion, not what led up to the crucifixion, just really the crucifixion. The resurrection and the ascension is really the only Jesus-related thing that Paul relates, other than him believing that Jesus is a God and that sort of thing. God, Son of God, you're saying the same thing, really. No, anyways, Acts 13:14. Claudius was the emperor in 41 through 54 of the Common Era. Events of the lesson are 45 through 48. Give an account of the relation of Paul to the early propagation of Christianity, his birthplace, character of the city, and his early culture, his religious and national relations before conversion, what three great characteristics united in him gave him special human fitness for his work, conference at Antioch, direction of the Holy Ghost, 13:1 through 3, departure of Barnabas and Saul to Seleucia and Cyprus, preaching in the synagogue at Salamis, adventure at Paphos, Elymas, the sorcerer and the Roman proconsul, miraculous judgment on the former and conversion of the latter, Saul henceforth known by Latin instead of his Hebrew name. Well, the text is in Greek, so I don't know if it says in verse 4 through 12 that it was because it was a Latin name. Paulus, Paul's company continued their tour. Mark, who had been with them hitherto, returns to Jerusalem, verse 13. What was the subsequent event of this departure? 15, 37 through 40. arrival at Antioch in Pisidia, attendance upon the synagogue service, Paul's address, 16 through 41, outline of the argument that Jesus was the Messiah. Why does he dwell so much upon Christ's humiliation? Could it be some psychological thing that he's addressing himself or his past? What false ideas had the Jews acquired on the subject? Well, all throughout Tanakh, there's not this one Messiah idea, so I'm sure that was one of the ones they were claiming the Jews had a false idea about, because they took the term literally and they looked at context. And what warning does he give them? Desire of the Jews, verse 42. Candid and serious-minded Jews exhorted vast multitudes of Gentiles and non-Jews and Jews drawn to hear Paul. Envy of the latter and their opposition. 43 through 45. The rebuke administered. What was the regular order of presenting the gospel? 46. Non-Jews invited. Greatness of the work. 7 through 49. And, I mean, different tribe, not just, because plenty of Jews, even then, didn't have Judaism as religion. Greatness of the work, 47 through 49. Persecution and expulsion of the apostles, 50. How does their conduct agree with the direction of their master, 41. And Mark 6:11. Their departure to Iconium and their state of mind, 51 and 52. The apostles at Iconium, preaching to the Jews first. Conversion of the Gentiles, 14:1. Persecution incited by hostile Jews. Progress of the work nevertheless. Combination of Jews and, well, how are they distinguishing their insults of Gentile and heathen? And so people with huts, I guess. Jews lived in huts too, I'm sure. Combination of Jews and other nations, and flight of the apostles to Lystra and Derbe, verse 2 through 7 of 14. Miracles at Lystra, compare it with the first apostolic miracle at Jerusalem. Effect on the people, attempt to offer sacrifice to Barnabas and Paul as gods. Action and address of the apostles. Give the line of the argument, 8 through 17. Indifference between the method of the argument and that usually addressed to the Jews. The sacrifices prevented, 18. Jews from Antioch and Iconium escape persecution. Paul nearly killed. They go to Derbe, return to the cities recently visited, organizing the churches and encouraging believers to persist even though tribulation and persecution, 19 through 23. Continued journey and preaching, return to Antioch. They make report of their mission and abide for a time, 24 through 28. And I guess that's